Stay with us today as special guest Jesse Rabinowitz has a background in both law and social work with a current focus on advocacy to end homelessness. He serves as the campaign and communications director at the National Homelessness Law Center, where he directs the Housing Not Handcuffs campaign and worked on the historic Johnson's versus Grants Pass Supreme Court case of June 2024. Previously, he was a senior manager for policy and advocacy at Miriam's Kitchen, a DC based nonprofit, where he managed the Way Home campaign, which successfully secured funding to end chronic homelessness for thousands of individuals.
And he has an MSW, a Master of Social Work from Howard University. Please welcome to our show, Jesse Rabinowitz.
Welcome, Jesse.
Welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me. It's good to see you.
Great to have you on board today. So we're talking about a real serious issue, and for November, this is particularly interesting to our listeners, and I think we all need to hear this message. So help us understand the landscape here. What are the most significant legal barriers and systemic issues that contribute to the cycle of homelessness? And can you explain the significance of the Johnson versus Grants Pass Supreme Court case of June 2024?
Absolutely. The biggest barrier and the biggest thing that contributes to homelessness across the country is that the rent is just too high.
Right.
Half of renters struggle to make their rental payments. I'll say that again. Half of renters struggle to pay rent each month. They pay more than they can afford each month.
Mhm.
1 out of every 4 people worry about imminently becoming homeless, and 1 out of 5 households are spending all of their income on rent. So this is not a housing system that works for most people. This is a housing system that works for billionaires.
Mhm.
And when you have a housing system that only works for the super rich, you have people who can't afford rent, which means people are going to sleep outside.
Mhm.
For every time rent goes up $100, homelessness goes up by 9%. So we know that rents that are too high cause homelessness. And what the Grants Pass decision did said that cities and states can arrest or ticket people for sleeping outside even when they have nowhere else to go.
Wow.
And we have seen over 260 cities pass laws that make it a crime to be homeless since the decision about 16 months ago.
Wow.
Goodness. So you're talking about the criminalization of homelessness, and that's often used. Can you explain what that means and provide a specific example of how a law that targets people experiencing homelessness?
Sure. And when I think of the criminalization of homelessness, I think of laws, policy, and practice that punish people or that target people for doing what they need to survive when they're sleeping outside because they have nowhere else to go. So sleeping, eating, going to the bathroom. We've seen people try to pass laws to make it illegal to share food with homeless people in parks. We have seen cities pass laws that make it illegal to help homeless people. And in Kentucky, we have seen a statewide anti-camping law that resulted in a woman experiencing homelessness being given a citation when she was in active labor.
Yes.
So when she was in the middle of childbirth and she needed help, the police gave her a ticket. That is cruel, and that doesn't help anybody.
Wow. So that's very insightful. Beyond the legal challenges, what are some of the most common myths and misconceptions about homelessness that you feel are important to correct?
The biggest myth about homelessness is that homelessness is a personal choice. I've never met anyone in my career who said, when I was growing up, I dreamed of becoming homeless.
Yeah.
People are forced into homelessness because rents are too high and wages are too low.
Yes.
But instead of getting serious and fixing our broken housing system, politicians are trying to pass laws to make it a crime to be homeless. And in doing so, they're trying to distract people from their inability to do their jobs, which is to make sure people can afford rent and to make sure that everyone has access to safe and affordable housing.
Yeah. Well, we know that November is Awareness Month for this, and I guess what speaks to me is that this can happen to anyone. So I don't want our listeners to sit here and judge
Absolutely.
what they see on the streets. There's mental health issues. There's all kinds of reasons, for whatever reason that may be, that doesn't justify someone having to live on the street, not having a place to eat, not
Mm-hmm.
having a place to sleep, not having a place to go to the bathroom.
Right.
The judgment,
Mm-mm.
leave it.
So, how does your work at the National Homeless Law Center reveal the intersection of homelessness with the issue of race, gender, and disability?
Mm.
We know that homelessness can happen to anybody, but people with marginal identities, and especially people with multiple marginalized identities, are more likely to experience homelessness. Where
Wow.
I am in Washington, D.C., 9 out of 10 people experiencing homelessness are Black, compared to about 45% of the general population. So we know
Never knew
that is
that.
not that is not a mistake. That is not an accident. That is what happens when you have past and present racist policies. And it also shows that, again, there is a system forcing people into homelessness. It is not a choice that individuals are making. And we know that we're never going to solve homelessness until we seriously address our past and current racist policies.
Yeah, it seems the systemic issues are the cause here, and it seems like it's done specifically and on purpose. What have you learned about the difference between providing temporary relief and creating lasting solutions for housing insecurity?
I've learned that people are generally aware of at least some of the temporary relief that exists, right? Finding food,
Mhm.
finding clean clothes, and people experiencing homelessness are incredibly resourceful
Yeah.
and strong, and they don't want to live outside anymore. The two most things that I got asked for when I was doing direct service work, working at encampments and working at a drop-in center, were a safe place to live and a
Mhm.
job that paid a living wage so people could afford rent. And the truth is, people want a place to live, but there are just too few units that people can afford to go around, and there's not enough work that pays a living wage for people to go around. So people have no choice but to sleep outside. We have, and it's good to provide temporary solutions like
Right.
housing. I'm sorry, it's good to provide temporary solutions like shelter and food. But to actually solve homelessness, we need to get serious about addressing our housing crisis.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm.
And it's affordable housing,
Affordable.
because
Absolutely.
what our statistics is showing us is that the housing is there, it's just not affordable.
Mm. So, speaking of like pathways to change, for our listeners who are concerned about homelessness in their community, what is the single most impactful thing they can do to help?
The single most important thing that people can do to help is to make noise. We are
Mm.
fighting uh, a well funded, billionaire backed campaign that wants to force homeless people into government run detention camps. And they are
Mm.
making noise, right? They're writing op eds, they're financing politicians, they are lobbying their city officials. We have to get as loud as they are.
Mm.
And we know that we're never going to outfund billionaires, but we
Yeah.
don't have to. We can beat them because we have the truth on our side, we have morality on our side, we have the fact that throwing people in jail doesn't solve homelessness on our side, and we have public opinion on our side. About
Mm.
7 out of 10 voters believe that the solution to homelessness is housing, not handcuffs. We need to get as loud and even louder than the folks who are trying to force homeless people into government run detention camps.
Mm.
So, can you discuss a successful legal case or policy change that serves as a powerful example of how advocacy can create real progress?
Sure. One campaign that comes to mind is a campaign we did in DC here that increased taxes slightly for people making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And
Hmm.
with that small tax increase, we were able to fund 6,000 units of permanent supportive housing for people experiencing homelessness. And this shows that cities and states can make real change. And right now, we know the federal government is not going to do anything to help people.
Mm.
So it's imperative that local and state elected officials use every tool in their toolbox to find and dedicate resources to helping people make ends meet.
Mm.
Good.
Got to make those ends meet. What is the role of grassroots organizing and pushing for more humane and effective policies at the local level?
Grassroots organizing is at the heart of any successful policy fight, right? It gives you the actual reality on the ground. It is make sure your work is informed and led by people who are experiencing these issues. And honestly, it's the only thing that works, right? When we see policy campaigns that only focus on elected officials inside Washington, D.C., focused only on this inside the Beltway politicking, it
Mm-hmm.
just doesn't work.
Okay.
And we know that more and more people are struggling to pay rent, and we have to come together and say, instead of arresting people for sleeping outside, we demand that our elected officials do their jobs and make sure that everybody has a safe place to live.
Thank you. For our listeners who are not lawyers or policy experts, what specific resources or toolkits does the National Homelessness Law Center provide to help them advocate for change?
We encourage folks to check out our website, homelesslaw.org, to learn more about the work of the Law Center and get informed in the many policy areas that we work on. And then specifically to fight criminalization, we direct folks to housing.handcuffs.org, which has maps, data, sample legislation, action alerts, everything that you need to take action to fight for housing and against handcuffs.
Okay, we're on it.
What is a key lesson you've learned about the importance of elevating the voices and experiences of those who have personally experienced homelessness?
Telling stories is the most integral way to bust myths, right? And
Mhm.
these myths about homelessness are driven by this false belief that people choose to be homeless.
There
And
you
that
go.
is fueling this false belief that if we make homelessness hard enough, people will choose somewhere else to go. So when we are able to tell the stories of people who are able to say from their own experience, there was nowhere else to go, it breaks through. And also, we can tell success stories. We can tell stories of clients who were living outside and who aren't living outside anymore because they have a safe place to live.
Very good.
It also is integral to policy design and implementation. We sometimes think we have really great ideas as like,
Mhm.
professional policy folks. And
Mhm.
then we talk to someone who's been homeless and they're like, that's never going to work.
Yeah.
We have to make sure that our policy solutions are ground truth in people's lived experience.
Okay. So looking to the future, speaking of policy solutions and promising, what are those? What are being discussed today, and which ones do you believe have the greatest potential to reduce the homelessness?
Um, I'm not seeing a ton of bright spots on the federal level.
Mhm.
We do have a bill before Congress called the Housing Not Handcuffs Act. It
Mhm.
was introduced in Congress by Congress members Jai Paul and Frost at the 1 year anniversary of the Johnson versus Grants Pass case.
Okay.
And this law would make it harder for federal agencies like the FBI, ICE, Border Patrol, Secret Service, National Park Police to make it a crime to be homeless. And as we see Trump deploying federal troops and federal police across the country, this is becoming more important than ever. So we're encouraging everyone to take action at housing.handcuffs.org, to contact their elected officials and tell them to pass the Housing Not Handcuffs Act. And we know that a law that makes it harder to arrest homeless folks is like not the floor, it is the basement. It is a sad
It's
state of
bare
affairs.
minimum.
This,
Yeah.
this is what we have to fight for. So, on the local and state level, we need to fight for proactive solutions to homelessness. We need to fight for more housing. We need to fight for more healthcare. We need to fight for all the things we know that solve homelessness.
Okay, we need to do that. What advice would you give to someone who wants to start the local initiative to support people experiencing homelessness but doesn't know where to begin?
I love that question.
Yeah.
I don't know that my advice would be to start something new. Most
Mhm.
communities already doing most communities across the country are already doing good work to
Mhm.
fight against laws that make it a crime to be homeless and fight for housing justice. So I'd encourage people to do the research and to plug into an existing organization that is doing the work day in and day out. We don't need more organizations, we need more people power. And we know that we are so powerful when we come together,
Mhm.
and we have to bring more people into this work.
Okay, yeah. And we know that a lot of people are being cut off from food resources next month. So
Yeah.
we're going to have the Hunger Games here pretty soon, and people will really know what it's like when they look at the Capitol. They'll be looking at it differently after next month. How can we shift the public conversation from seeing homelessness as an individual failure, because that's where the judgment comes from,
True.
to recognizing it as a systemic problem that requires collective response?
One of the things that we know is that most people, or not enough people, I'll say, connect high rents with high homelessness.
Mm.
And the more we talk honestly about how high the rent is and how that's impacting most people and how that's connected to homelessness is how we're able to change narrative, right? Like,
Right.
I don't have too many friends that are happy with the amount of rent they're paying each month.
Mm-mm.
Right.
Yeah.
And most people experiencing homelessness used to pay rent or used to pay mortgage and they couldn't keep up anymore.
Yeah.
And we have to connect these conversations because, as I mentioned, things are hard out there.
Yes.
60% of
Very.
households struggle to make ends meet. Instead of helping people, the government is spending $300 million to build a new ballroom.
Mm.
So we have the resources to help people, but our priorities are backwards. And we have to come together and build a movement that says you need to put people first and
Right.
fund basic needs like housing and healthcare before you build a ballroom.
Yeah, and it's not a right versus left thing here. This is just about the
People.
fact that people
Mhm.
want to live, they want to work, they want a place to stay. It's not that they don't want it, they just can't afford it
They
and they
need
can't do it.
support. They
But
need
they
the
need the
support.
support. Yeah.
Mm.
That's right.
In your opinion, what is the biggest obstacle to achieving the goal of ending homelessness in the United States?
That's a big question.
I
Yeah.
know.
If
It's a
you had
loaded
asked me two
question.
years ago, I would have said money. I don't think that's true anymore because, again, we see the government find $1 million a day to deploy the DC National Guard
Mm.
to take over our city. So the government can find money when they want to. I think the biggest obstacle in our path is political will. Politicians of both parties don't care about the needs of poor folks, don't
Mm-mm.
care about the needs of black and brown folks, don't care about the needs of immigrants. And we have to force their hand and demand the politicians from cities all the way up to DC do their jobs and make sure that everybody, regardless of where they come from, what they look like, what they do, who they love, has the basics we all need, like a safe place to live, access to healthy food, and access to quality medical care.
Right.
Yes, thank you. Um, Speaking to those who might need some advice right now, what advice can you give to someone who's currently experiencing homelessness or about to be homeless? Where can they turn to help for help?
It's a really city specific question. Most cities have hotlines that you can call or service providers that you can go to. Some cities even have homeless prevention funding that will prevent someone from getting evicted or prevent someone from even losing like the couch in their cousin's house that they're sleeping on,
Mm.
that can stop them from entering into literal homelessness.
Right.
But folks should contact their elected officials because often they know who the best people are to talk to and what the best nonprofits are doing the good work.
And there are resources out there too.
Right.
There are resources,
If they're
and there's
community
not
regulated.
nearly enough.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there, and we know that things are about to get even harder,
Worse.
right? The Trump administration, come November 1st, are kicking people off of food stamps.
Mm.
Yeah.
So the need, our social safety net is already stretched beyond
Right.
capacity, and it's about to get stretched even more. So
Oof.
there's more need than there are resources.
Mm. If every listener could walk away with a single commitment to turn their concern into an impactful contribution, what would that be?
Make noise.
Make
Every time you
noise.
see a homeless person, right? Here's what our opposition's doing. They see
Right.
a homeless person and they call their mayor, council member, whatever, and they say, "I saw a homeless person on my walk. You should arrest them, or you should kick them out." We got to call and say, "I saw this homeless person. Why haven't you funded housing? Why aren't you doing your job?" And
Okay.
tie it to a demand. Because let's be clear, like I don't want to see anybody sleeping outside. And
Right.
people sleeping outside don't want to sleep outside.
No.
There you
But
go.
we know that the only solution to homelessness is housing, and we have to demand that our elected officials fund housing, not handcuffs.
Mm.
Well, Jesse, we want to thank you for joining us today. This was a deep conversation, and your expertise as the campaign and communications director at the National Homelessness Law Center provided an essential perspective on the housing
No handcuffs.
not handcuffs campaign
Mm.
and the ongoing legal battles to protect the rights of unhoused neighbors. We appreciate you sharing your insights and for being a relentless advocate for systemic change. And we hope to have you back again to follow up on this important issue.
Absolutely. Thanks, y'all.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
Jesse.
much,
You
Jesse.
have a great one, okay?
You too.
Bye bye.
That was Jesse Rabinowitz, campaign manager at the National Homelessness Law Center, in a really powerful conversation on the legal and systemic challenges driving homelessness in the United States.
Yeah, Jesse gave us a lot to think about from understanding the reality of criminalization of homelessness and challenging those persuasive myths to distinguishing between temporary relief and the truly lasting housing solutions.
But what I hope listeners take away most are those actionable steps. What about that action? If you're looking to turn your concern into an impactful contribution, Jesse's guidance was clear. Educate yourself on the local policies and get involved in pushing the systemic change. This aligns perfectly with our mission at the Daily Balance of turning awareness into action.
So if you're ready to turn your concern into impactful contribution, visit the National Homelessness Law Center's website to learn more about the legal fight to end homelessness and to access resources and toolkits to advocate in your own community. Together, we can push for systemic change and help ensure everyone has a place to call home.
Thank you so much again to Jesse Rabinowitz for joining us and sharing this critical, powerful work. And thank you to our listeners for joining us on the Daily Balance podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit that subscribe button, like, share, and follow us on all social media platforms, the Daily Balance podcast. It really goes a long way to helping our mission and spreading awareness.
And the conversation doesn't stop here. For dedicated supporters, stick around for our after show called Tea Time. So, yeah, you want to stick around for that. And we'll be diving deeper into our story and details that relate to our topic and just hanging out.
Tea Time is where we get to connect with our closest community. If you want to be a part of that inner circle and get instant access to the after show, subscribe and join our community for Tea Time.
Tune in again next week for another inspiring episode. And until then, always remember, count it all joy.
That's it right there.